people of the so-called globe. This is an exciting day in scientific history for all of us of the sleuth community and the true crime world. This is a tube of airplane cement. It's made for cement, or cement for metal and wood. So I had the option, when it came time to get some airplane cement, I had the option between getting one that stuck to like polymers, plastics and stuff like that, or ones that stuck to metal and wood. Well, because that letter was written in 1969, I opted to go with the wood and metal one. Just because plastic, like, though I guess it existed at that time, was not quite in the same sort of plentiful surplus that it has found itself in now. So hopefully this will be a little more realistic. The only thing I want to do is document every step of this process. So I guess I'd start now only because I'm outside. It'll probably dry really fast, and then that gives us that little buffer period, because I'm sure that the perpetrator at the Paul Stine scene didn't put the cement on his fingers, if he did that at all, 5 minutes before the commission of the crime. So we're going to get some airplane cement here. Oh, geez. I don't know how he never explains to us how he spread the airplane cement, so I'm just gonna, and we're only gonna do like my left hand, and he says 2 coats. Remember, this is important, is if you're gonna do science, guys, the variables have to all be the same. Okay, so we're gonna try it out. Dude, it's such an absurd notion, but I do think he did it. And I used to just like kind of lean towards it, but I wouldn't tell you with any sense of conviction. But now I'm convinced enough that I went out and got airplane cement, because I took a closer look at those fingerprints from the Paul Stine cab, and I noticed some really weird shit about them. And one of those weird observations was the way that his fingertips appeared to be splotches without detail, and then ridge detail appeared to emerge in a distorted fashion around only the edges of those partial prints. And so when I saw that, I realized that I think he had airplane cement on his fucking fingers. So maybe, and we're going to find out, this is what science is about. I'm going to try to even it out a little bit, and then what we're going to do is wait till it fully dries, and then I'm going to put on a second coat of airplane cement. The only reason that I'm going to do that way is because he specifically mentions using 2 coats of airplane cement. So it's kind of indistinguishable, or it's kind of up to interpretation of like how quickly can you put a second coat on before, it's just considered part of the original coat. To be fair, I would say it would be after it dries, at least partially. And the first thing I do notice about putting airplane cement all over my fingers is it's super uncomfortable. And the other thing is kind of interesting, and how it relates to what we see from the Paul Stine cab and the evidence is, if you look at those prints, you see what kind of looks like a circular cap sitting on top of his fingertips. It feels like that too. I get, it's just a weird feeling. It feels like you have plastic gloves on. It's fucking weird. Hi, welcome to my wacky show. It's now time for coat 2 of airplane cement. So coat 1 has pretty much dried. There are a number of starting observations and initial observations I want to make, and I guess I'll put the second coat on at the same time as I talk so that we don't waste time. The first thing is that the airplane cement does crack easily if you move your hands at all during that curing process. Now, there's no indication that he wasn't holding his hands still for several hours. He might have done so, because again, this is his entire freedom and life on the line, and for me it's just a stupid little scientific experiment to determine whether or not we think maybe this claim was credible. So I'm not going to be quite as motivated to get this right as whoever wrote the bus bomb letter, but I will say that the second coat is probably going to mitigate that, just based on what it feels like and what it looks like so far. There's very minimal cracking, and I think once it's kind of hardened, you get a lot less. Especially when you'll get the cracks of like where the joints of the finger are, and then it opens the cement up, and then after that it doesn't really crack much more, it seems. Another observation here is that he says that it's quite unnoticeable and very effective. Yeah, dude, actually. Joking aside, to be like really scientific right now and give you guys some objective analysis of sitting here with airplane cement on my fingers, the first thing I want to say is that aside from the shine, you see the shine? I don't know if you can see it on camera what it looks like for you, because these two fingers have no cement, these two have cement. I mean, it's pretty unnoticeable actually, especially when it dries and I peel off some of these little flakes here or maybe sand it with something just really soft. It will probably be my route, because I'm probably gonna get like the shirt or even, and just kind of lightly brush off these little specks of shit here. I think once that's been addressed, those little flakes and stuff, and they might fall off on their own too, it's pretty unnoticeable. I'm actually like really surprised how unnoticeable that really is. Look at that. You get a little bit of shine, but if you're, I mean, who's the cab drivers? You get in the cab and what's he gonna, hey buddy, your fingers look shiny. Let me make sure you're not trying to shoot me. I don't think he would have noticed it. I don't think anyone would have noticed that. We know DB Cooper probably did something similar because he didn't have gloves and yet he only left palm prints and no fingerprints. So it's very likely that DB Cooper did this too. That would have been in 1971. But we don't have the claim from Cooper. We have the claim from the Zodiac Killer that he did that. So we're going to test that and we're going to find out if this is true. It's probably a credible claim. This could easily have happened. The only reason I say that is because I have personal precedent. I knew a criminal that claimed that he had done this. DB Cooper appears to have done something similar. The Unabomber appears to have done something similar, and Zodiac directly claims that he did this. But then it does raise questions too, and you have to, in science, you try to tear your own stuff down, and I'm going to do that too. I'm going to be fair about this. Is why would you do this? It's kind of weird, actually, because he lives in the Bay Area. It's October. It's probably fucking cold. I could look up the weather that day and probably tell you on the historical archives and stuff, but why not just wear gloves? So I dug into that, and people were like, oh, you can leave a glove print. It's like, yeah, but not if you burn the gloves. And we already know that he used a different firearm at every crime scene, or a different weapon at every crime scene. Even the Paul Stine 9mm was a different weapon than was used at Blue Rock Springs. And I think initially there was some claims that it was a 380, like some of the reports and stuff. But I believe now that we know it was a 9mm cartridge. I don't even know if it's a parabellum. I'm going to have to look that up too. Might have been a parabellum, or it could have been a different cartridge of a 9mm, 380 or something. But point is, why would you not just wear gloves? It's very strange behavior. It doesn't really... I think it might have been experimental, and it might have been, self-serving in terms of ego, because if he goes to the press and the people and he's like, oh, look how fucking smart I am, I put fucking glue on my fingers, and everybody's like, whoa, he's a super villain. A lot of it's PR, but he may have very well done it. Welcome to Operation Airplane Cement. This is the presentation part of the actual images that resulted from the experiments described before this. Now, I don't have the toolbox open, but so this is the, gee whiz, these are latent prints that were left that that I made by the application of Sharpie ink to the bare ridges of my right hand. Before that ink could dry, then put it on the paper firmly. And sometimes it's a little hard to get these, but that's just mostly the ink being wet or dry. And we'll kind of go into that later. But these are bare prints here with no cement. Okay, and then this is after the UPC, the glue that was used. If anyone wants to know, it's the universal product code for this exact glue. Is the barcode number is 75611350509, apparently. And it's Rust-Oleum metal and wood airplane cement. And then the left hand was 2 fingers of the left hand. It was the, as you saw in the video. And then the same process was applied for this one to this one. And I mean, I'm going to go into close-ups and stuff in a little bit anyway, but just to give you a little preliminary zoom in there, that's what you're looking at in terms of the airplane cement technique. Now, I think that these ridges, they look like identifiable ridges. There might even be a whorl here or something, but I think it's not. It's kind of an illusion. Like some of this, because it's hard to tell what's been altered by the cement and then what's been originally there. And, of course, that can create huge problems for, investigative agencies, especially in court. Like, in terms of admissible evidence, this would be a problem. But fortunately, there's other stuff that we're going to bring up. Alright, then these are close-up of the same figures. This is figure 1. It's the latents from the control hand. And then this is figure 2 zoomed in higher resolution than the one you saw seconds ago. And again, you could see what I was referring to, how that loop is kind of an illusion, because there is some ridge detail definitely down here on the bottom, and then definitely like a right up in here, but it's very little, and it's also super distorted and altered, and that's problematic. Alright, so there's those scans, and then I'll show you some direct comparison stuff. This is a key. So obviously figure 1 control sample latent fingerprints were created by the direct application of indelible ink to the bare ridge details of the right hand fingers. These fingers were then pressed firmly onto copying paper while the ink was still wet to produce the sample visible in the scan. And copying paper is being blue on one side, white on the other. It's mainly, I think, just for scanning and copying purposes. Helps with light not shining through or whatever or something. Figure 2 variable sample latent fingerprints were attempted by the direct application of indelible ink to the surface of 2 coats of Rust-Oleum brand metal and wood model airplane glue, airplane cement. Okay, figure 3. Figure 3 is a close-up of the high-resolution scan of figure 1 to more clearly depict the ridge details of the control fingerprints. Figure 4 is a close-up of the high-resolution scan of figure 2 to more clearly depict the utter failure to produce high-quality latent prints of sufficient comparison points. Climate conditions present in the environment, in the test environment, were as follows. Temperature was 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 72% humidity with 2 coats. The second was applied after crude drying of the first coat, but without extensive curing time. And then the climate conditions present at the Paul Stine scene were as follows as of 11 p.m., October 11th of 1969. It would have been 57 degrees Fahrenheit, 59% humidity, allegedly 2 coats of an unknown formula of airplane cement, claimed on page 2 of the bus bomb letter. Which I have a whole video on the bus bomb letter. If anyone wants to see the exact claims, they're gone into in detail there. Before I knew a little more from having done the experiment. Does the holdback evidence in the mystery contain samples of this airplane cement, which would very likely have flaked off inside the taxi? This is important. This is not something that I even considered until, until I did the experiment. And this is, I talk about this, the importance of like going out and doing practical application science in order to at least inch us closer to a conclusion. The thing is, it's because of the way that the true crime culture kind of is, people they really quickly jump to conclusions, and it's really lost on a lot of people just how long it and how much effort it actually requires to really reasonably or believably or credibly assume something or conclude something. We can have like hypotheses and I think it might have been this and this is possible to do, but even this thing that you're seeing now, this whole presentation, Operation Airplane Cement, it's really only like one tiny little experiment that you would have to repeat. You would, people come and do their own versions of it. They use different materials, and only then is it like time to start saying, okay, what's the data that we have? And another thing, you guys, is that a lot of this data has been held back from us, at least in the real case. So in order to determine some of the things, we're going to have to do a lot of experiments, and that's just all there is to it. And people don't like that. This is super important. It took me a while to realize it, and I definitely didn't realize it until I tried the experiment. But when this stuff flakes off of the hands, it's also going to bring with it the true ridge details that are under the cement. So the biggest area of concern, I think, at this point, like having taken some time to digest the data and the kind of what this experiment felt like and was like and produced, that's a serious issue, is how would you get around that? Because it's a scary concept, because if one of those falls off, it's clear. You're not going to find that, So you could be accidentally leaving gigantic, really amazing fingerprints with that way, if they flake off. It's assuming they flake off. I'm not sure if that was mitigated in some way. It's never mentioned. Okay, so maybe it's holdback too. We don't know. It's holdback. There is holdback, so maybe one of the holdbacks is flakes of glue that actually have like legit. We're not sure ultimately. until that information is released. All right, question 2 is, how would these latent prints be affected if the latent deposit were rapidly drying blood instead of indelible ink? As I mentioned, there are differences, but a latent print's a latent print in a sense. We can at least test and see, like, does glue, does that help at all? And what do you learn? And again, like I said, one of the things I learned is that, flaking off and being able to, so that's not something I would have thought of before I tried the experiment too much. I thought about, like, the glue melting off or coming off and how that might be a problem, but the concept of it flaking off and bringing incredible high-quality forensic evidence didn't dawn on me until I did this experiment. So that's something to look at or think about. How and why did he determine that he was willing to stake everything on that technique? Okay, while the nominal application certainly seems to indicate an effective forensic countermeasure, the author did not observe something so reliable that one's freedom could be staked on the success, like, obviously. But again, this is not a sane, so a lot of times we're trying to figure out, like, why would you do that? It's not rational. Is any of it? So, how would the contact range discharge from a semi-automatic sidearm chambered in 9mm affect the integrity of the adhesive coating? This sounds like a sensationalized question, but it's not. When I was like 12 years old, I fired a lever action Winchester drop lever repeater. It's a repeater, Winchester repeater. And probably just poor technique and experience at that time, whatever it is. When I would cycle the action, it would kind of nick my thumb or my hand somewhere. I think it was my thumb. And then when you discharge, you would get powder residue in that, and it hurts. And a lot of people, if you've ever fired a lot of firearms, you'll notice you definitely get the residue on your hands for sure. And again, GSR tests are designed to test for that, so we do know that that's a thing. But just from feeling wise, that I do wonder about that. It's possible that the GSR would create kind of an aggregate that might stick into that glue and either peel it off or create other problems. We're not sure. This is not the part that I tested, obviously. Why did he not wear gloves? Surely this would have been a more reliable and comfortable solution, and the results would likely be more effective, as even the deposit of minimal partial prints would be successfully countered through the conventional application of non-porous gloves. People talk about, oh, he's going to leave glove prints. Just burn them. Okay? There's no glove to test for. So then, especially considering the flaking glue thing, glove seems way more reliable. Exactly how many valid points of breach comparison can be seen in the scans of my prints above. So that kind of, if we can maybe repeat this procedure a number of times, if anyone out there is a forensics guy and knows how to say, hey, oh, you got 10 points of comparison there, that would be great, because if we could get some data on how many points of comparison remain after the airplane cement thing, then we could assess that information as to its relevance or as to its relation to how many points of comparison we saw at the Stine scene. If I do the experiment 25 times and the average number of the average number of comparison points of the partials is like 9 or 10 or whatever, well, we know that there's 9 points of comparison from the Stine cab, at least from public knowledge. And that might indicate some consistencies, which again doesn't prove anything, you guys. All it does is help look at these things, determine what's real and what's not over time, and never with, oh, he said he spelt the word until with 2 L's, therefore he's the Zodiac Killer. The author is not aware of any official statement from the contemporary or later SFPD which is relevant to these claims. Is this silence evidence of withheld or unreleased information, or is this notable silence completely unrelated? That is yeah, did they say anything about this? Because I know that some SFPD guys or LE in some capacity from one of these jurisdictions somewhere went at least on television or on a film camera, and they did respond to the claims about being in the park and the dogs and the searchlights and stuff. So that was all talked about. So then I wonder, was there any official statement from the SFPD about this? Does anyone know of one? I haven't found one yet, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And then also, what if so, what is that statement? And then if not, how does that relate to whether or not this was applied, the airplanes thing? Another important aspect of the question, or interesting little observation, is you and this is part of the thing that I say, like, look at every detail if you're going to try to figure anything, or at least if you're going to claim that you have figured something out. Like, you could try to figure stuff out by looking at D.B. Cooper all day if you want in relation to this, but don't assume that you actually have it figured out. There's a lot of science that has to go into some of this stuff. Like, this Operation Airplane Cement is not proof of anything. All this is this possible? For one, what happens if you do this, and do we see any evidence that the results of the experiment are at all consistent with the actual evidence? So this is a direct comparison between the latent prints at the Stine scene, and then latent prints in figure 2/4. Here's some interesting things to note, and I'm just gonna try to be real. I'm not gonna speculate too much about what I did. Another take of this earlier, and I think I went off a little bit with a little too much speculation. So I just want to look at what we actually see on screen. Note here that some of these areas are very, very dark. We're not, I mean, maybe this is blood. I don't know what this is, because they dust for this stuff, I think. These are not, like, does anyone know if this is, like, cross sections? It's tape, right? So that what they do, they, like, dust it, and then they lift it with tape or something. And then these are those lifts. There's some interesting, I think these are information on where it came from the car. We start to see some very strange stuff in these prints, and the resolution's absolutely horrible. I can't upscale it, because then it will produce false or misleading information for the observer, aka us. So I had to leave it as the original scans. But, like, look at some of these weird areas here. This is not something that I thought of much before. If these are slides, like with tape, then it indicates that nothing was left in this gap here, at all. Now, if this is a direct piece of the panel and these are the actual latents, I'm not sure what these are. Are these photos, or, like, what is this, you guys? Does anyone know? Is this print dusting, or is this actual just naked photography of the latents? But there's these big gaps, and in these gaps you see a complete lack of detail, and I'm going to get into a couple of things on the far right here. You see this lack of detail, but then around the edges and stuff, like, look on the tip of, I wish I could draw on the screen. I know you can see my cursor, I think, but on the tip of this print here, it's like a little bit of detail starting to emerge at the top with ridges. Same down here. And this even looks like maybe cracking of the glue. It's possible. I don't know for sure. Could be anything. But then look at, this is what I assume is, I don't have to read the thing again, I think. How weird. These are so weird looking, actually. It's like looking at a ghost or something. On the tip here, you see the white space of nothing. And it's only on that tip, and it's so extreme. Look at the dividing line there. What is that? Because I think this is the tip of the underside of the finger. Like, this is maybe, I don't know if it's the middle. It's super hard to tell, you guys, but it's one of these fingers. And then now you look at these latents from Operation Airplane Cement. Let's see what this is. I think monochromatic or something. Let's see before I go into that. Yeah, these are really bad, but just note kind of what you see with the print. So there's these big gap areas, and then very little detail. You definitely see, like, look at this. There's a lot of ridge detail right here, right there. Yeah, but then it just stops. It totally looks like he did this. In fact, you could look right here. That looks like airplane cement for sure, I think. It looks like he used a lot too, guys. Actually, it's hard to tell. But there's something so sudden about the edges on his versus mine, where it's just kind of like all murky and fucked off. But it's the same concept. You see like a little ridge detail on the bottoms here, right at the edges. And then as you get closer to the print, you see staticky, weird splotchiness. It just doesn't really resolve to anything. And that looks a lot like what we see at Stine, actually. Doesn't mean it looks the same, but I really do think these prints here on the left, all this stuff right here, it really looks airplane cementy to me. big time. So this is an up close monochromatic direct comparison between this is the, I guess just one of them. It's that one right there. Like I said at the time, that one looked good at the time. The left is one of the fingerprints lifted by the SFPD from the crime scene of the murder of Paul Stine on October 11, 1969 in Presidio Heights. Blah blah blah. This is more if you're reading it. These prints are latent prints deposited with semi-dry blood of the cab driver. Okay, we all know that. Now, right is figure 2, and it's the leftmost latent print sample. So that means, unfortunately, this is with a video I can explain this a little bit. This is figure 2/4, same sample, and it's the one on the left. Okay. This latent print was produced by applying indelible ink over the surface of my fingers with 2 times coats of Rust-Oleum airplane cement. Applied, at which point his finger was pressed on blue-white copying paper before the ink had dried. This was scanned at 1000 dpi. So this is, when I show you guys these up close kind of comparisons, the precise detail of the actual contours is not so much relevant, though it is completely relevant. What I do want to draw your attention, because these scans are really bad quality, and I'll try to find some better ones. Maybe we can go it that way. But what I do want to draw your attention to is similar broad patterns. Like, see how we have these, like a gap in the middle of the print here, gap in the middle of the print type of thing, and then ridges coming out in finer detail around the edges. These kinds of things. Overall broad characteristics. And you start seeing some weird stuff that looks airplane cementy for sure. But because you're looking broad, you can't. Like, I can't go and be, for sure he did that. We don't know that for sure. So despite the higher resolution scan of the sample at right, significant curious consistencies do apparently occur. Namely, ridge details have been obfuscated to extremely blurred and vague distortions of the underlying print in both samples. I mean, it's so hard to tell because of resolution, but one thing that kind of helps give it away, even though the bad resolution, is that there are parts of those scans where you do see the ridge details, and it's in the same print. So I mean, it's the same scan, same print, everything. Why is it like parts of the print have ridge details and then others are static? Doesn't prove airplane cement, but it leans at it for sure. There's just something weird about them. They don't look right.